Okay, oh my esteemed viewers out there, is your favorite tutor the formula. So in this morning's class, we are going to be looking at a very important topic in microeconomics, which is known as consumer and producer surplus. Now, I would like to start by defining the concept consumer and producer surplus. Let me start with consumer surplus first of all. Consumer surplus is simply the excess of the amount a consumer is willing to pay for a commodity over what he actually paid for the commodity. It was a concept that was introduced into classical microeconomics by the great neoclassical economists known as Alfred Marshall. So that is why the concept sometimes it can be known as the Marshallian or the buyer surplus. Now, what is the Marshallian surplus telling us? It is telling us that provided the market is perfectly competitive, that the market is not regulated, that the forces of demand and supply takes predominance in the market, that the price that will be established by this demand and supply forces, it is that price that will maximize what the consumer surplus and the producer surplus. So these were the viewpoints of Alfred Marshall. Now, consumer surplus is telling us that the utility you are getting from consuming a goods is practically greater than the price you paid for the commodity. So I think what I'm saying now, we are going to describe it mathematically so that it can appeal more to my audience, or rather to my viewers, please pardon me. Now, mathematically, first of all, we are looking at consumer and producers surplus. Consumer and producer surplus. Mathematically, the consumer surplus is telling us, consumer surplus C of S is telling us that total welfare minus total expenditure. Consumer surplus is given by the formula total welfare is equals to total, consumer surplus is giving us that total welfare minus total expenditure must be greater than what? Zero. So this is the concept of consumer surplus. Remember that total welfare is the same thing as total utility, and that total expenditure on a commodity is the same thing as price of the commodity, times the quantity of the commodity purchased. So please take note that total expenditure on any commodity is the price you are paying per each goods multiplied by the total unit of the goods you are buying. So this is known as what now? The total what now? Expenditure. Now, total welfare is a measure of the total satisfaction you have gotten from consuming a good, which is the same thing as total utility. Now, please take note that total utility is still the same thing as integral mu dq. When we integrate from 0 to what? Q. So, the total utility of any function is the integral of the marginal utility of the function with respect to quantity when we integrate, when we consume from 0 to Q units. So, please take note, this is the formula for what now? Total utility. Now, if we say that consumer surplus C of S, where we started from, is total welfare minus total expenditure will be bigger than 0, it simply means that consumer welfare, total welfare, we have gotten it as integral 0 to Q of mu dq minus, we have gotten this as P, Q, P and Q. Remember that total expenditure is given as what now? The price of each goods you are buying times what now? The quantity of the goods you want to buy. Now, it simply means that we have already obtained a small formula for what now? Consumer surplus. We have already stated that consumer surplus is integral mu dq minus p dq. So we have gotten from 0 to q of mu dq minus pq. Please note, at equilibrium, the price of any commodity must be equal to the marginal utility of that commodity. I can call this equation number 3. I can call this equation 2, and I can call this equation number 1. Now, my viewers out there should know that economically, every rational and commonsensical consumer is said to have attained equilibrium when the price is paying for a commodity is equal to what now? The marginal utility of that commodity. So, if this is true, if you insert equation 3 into equation 2, we are going to have that consumer surplus C of S is the definite integral from 0 to Q. This Q is the equilibrium quantity of mu dq minus P. Please take note, this P and Q, they are what now? Respectively the equilibrium price and the equilibrium of quantity. Because it is only in a perfectly competitive market that consumer producer surplus is maximized. Every other market now has a way of depleting and reducing the consumer and the producer surplus. It depends on the kind of activity going on there. And when the market is not perfectly competitive, anything that distorts the free working of the demand and supply, it will create a loss in the market. This loss is what is technically and economically called the deadweight loss. We are going to analyze that one in our subsequent class. Now, please take note. Okay, so we are this, since we said that at equilibrium P is equals to mu, so we are going to have the consumer surplus equation as CS is equals to integral 0 to Q of E of P dq, where P is inverse, demand function. So it simply means that P must be given in form of F of Q. This is what we mean by inverse demand function. It simply means that this P you are saying is no longer price, although it's called price in economic jargon, because price is still the same thing as average revenue, and average revenue is still the same thing as what, and the demand function. So please take note that this price is simply what, that the inverse demand function, which is what you are seeing now. So on the long run, we are going to have that the consumer surplus is the definite integral of 0 to Q of E of P dq minus PE QE, where PE and QE, they are respectively what now? The equilibrium quantity and the equilibrium price. Okay, my esteemed viewers out there, this is the much I can take in this class. I am going to do another brief video now illustrating to you how we can obtain this information on a graph and how we can equally obtain the producer surplus as well. So make it a date with me. Have a nice day, my esteemed viewers.